What's up, YouTube? How's everybody doing? Prof Sales coming at you with another episode of Connect, the show where we connect you to resellers and community, maybe people you've heard of, maybe you haven't heard of them. Oh, sorry.
What happened?
Such a rookie mistake when you forget to turn off the external volume.
Oh.
Tonight we have Evelos. Am I saying that right too, by the way?
Yeah.
I've said that many times. Okay, I've got it right.
Evelos.
Christopher. And Christopher I'm excited about the show because Christopher has been a reseller now for, what, 30 years, Christopher?
Oh, pretty much, almost 30 years. I started when I was like really young.
Nice, man. That is awesome. So definitely you guys let me know if you can hear me okay in the chat and everything. I'm kind of doing something a little different here with my setup here. I just want to make sure everybody can hear us okay. Karen's there. She says, we sound good. Hello, Karen. All right, so tonight is going to be cool because we're going to talk about some categories we haven't talked about. There's going to be Q&A. I'm going to give Chris a moment or two to talk about himself and what he does and who he is and his experience for a moment. And then we're going to get right into questions, guys. So if you've got questions, go ahead and start typing those questions in the chat. Make sure you put question marks in front of your question or the word question. I will copy and paste them the best I can. We'll try to keep up with them and get to them. But first up, I'm going to let Chris tell you a little bit about himself, who he is, and what he does and his experience. So Chris, tell everybody about yourself.
So first off, I want to say thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I love the Connect format. It's really awesome. You learn a lot because of the diversity of your different guests and everything. So thank you for allowing me to be a guest on your show. Yeah, I'm Chris, aka Evelos. I'm also just started a new channel called Thrift Shop Hustler, and I've been reselling since the mid '80s. When I was really young, I sold garbage pail kids to local neighborhood kids, and then probably the main thing that sparked me was in 1988 I found a baseball card on the floor of a parking lot in Toys R Us, and my dad was like, "Oh, that's a baseball card." And a year later, after amassing a huge collection when I was 9 years old, he took me to a swap meet, which is what we call here in California like a flea market, and set me up. I started selling baseball cards at a very young age, and I learned a lot. Through the years, I collected all kinds of toys, video games. We can seriously go crazy about the history. I mean, I ran 2 eBay stores for hobby shops, and I learned a great amount of stuff. I did one for a coin place that sold old coins. I did place that sold die-cast cars, and I ran their eBay thing in the early 2000s. I was one of the first people to get an account on eBay. I was selling before eBay. And now I also do art, and I sell my art on eBay and Amazon. And now I'm just a regular seller. I like to admit that I'm part-time. I have a full-time job. I work in the TV and music industry, or the movie and TV show industry, and so it's kind of hard to balance everything. So I do this part-time. I just wanted to let everyone know that.
Man, that's awesome. That is like quite a list of accomplishments and experience you have there, sir. And we'll get into some more of those collectibles and what it was like pre-eBay days too. That's hard for a lot of us to imagine. Like there was life before eBay, right?
Yeah, there definitely was. And it's funny because when people talk about pre-eBay, they call it the Wild West, but it's honestly more like the Stone Age because everything was so primitive. Everything was new, and we should go into that. That was a fun time in reselling history for sure.
So Travis had wrote and said he would like to hear some info on good video games to buy and sell. Now that's obviously kind of a broad question, but maybe you could narrow that down a little bit and talk about maybe genres or platforms.
I actually have a broad answer. It's very simple. Right now, the hottest video games to buy are Nintendo, NES, and Super Nintendo stuff. The thing is, the history of reselling, you can always bank on nostalgia. And right now, the hot thing right now with video games is Super Nintendo, regular Nintendo, and Nintendo 64 actually. And those ran from 1985 to, I want to say, 1998. So those 3 brands, definitely look out for those. Back in the day, you were able to find those for so cheap. And I wish that, you know, back then I knew what I knew now, but, you know, people always say that. So definitely Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Nintendo 64 is the stuff right now.
It's been interesting. Like Nintendo seems to just hold those older games, just seem to keep value. I mean, I find that interesting. It's like, why do people want them? You know, I mean, they were fun, but it's like,
right. And the thing is, the thing is nostalgia. I think a lot of sellers kind of ignore nostalgia. Like, things are going to come back around. Eventually, things are going to be popular. Like, I remember in the late 80s, and you probably remember this, Prof, where like neon stuff was like super hot, and it was like 1989, and like during the 90s, we're like, oh my God, I can't believe we wore neon stuff. And now like the neon Nike things are just so hot. And so always bank on nostalgia.
Yeah, that's so true. I was watching I was a big Olivia Newton-John fan back in the day. So I was watching a documentary on the movie Xanadu, which is not a great movie, but it now is like a cult following because it really brought people's attention to the roller disco craze that was going on at that time. And I was thinking, man, you know, that'll probably come back around. Like, it's so funny how all this stuff sort of comes back around, you know, to a new generation. After it skips a generation or two, it's no longer cool. And then all of a sudden, oh, wow, look at this again, you know?
Absolutely. And the thing is, right now, I think a lot of companies, they pay millions of dollars trying to figure out what the next big thing is. So as resellers, you kind of got to tap into that to figure out, okay, 10 years from now, what is going to be the thing that you can buy so cheap right now that people are just going to go nuts about in 10 years. So we'll see what happens with that.
That's a great tip. Ginger had asked if that is your art behind you on the wall and said, it's awesome, whatever it is.
Oh yeah. I think like 10 years ago, I went through this whole Jackson Pollock phase, because as an artist, the hardest thing for an artist is to find your style. And then I've quickly realized that I have no style, because a lot of the stuff that I do is kind of like repaints and stuff like that. We can get into that later, but I went through my Jackson Pollock phase, and this is a huge, like, I think it's like a 6 foot by 4 foot canvas. So thank you. I appreciate you asking about it.
Wow, I struggle to draw a stick person. So believe it or not, I really do. It's a true story. Right. Karen says, "Don't get him started on Olivia Newton-John." She was my crush, and she still kind of is in a weird way. But anyway, Karen has hers too. Let's just be real. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit too about the pre-eBay days, because you mentioned you guys started with sports collectibles and so on. How did you sell before eBay? And obviously Amazon wasn't around then either. How did you sell before, you know, you had these e-commerce platforms? Because I think in our world today, we're also connected, and we can, you know, send our message out to millions if we want. How did you, you know, find items to buy? How did you sell them to someone? How did you make a connection to someone? What sort of methods did you use back then? And do you still use any of that today in any sort of way?
See, that's a really good question. And it goes back to the face-to-face contact. I think in the mid 80s, late 80s, early 90s, you know, where there wasn't really the internet, you had to go to baseball card conventions. I sold a lot as a kid at swap meets. So like my dad would take me early in the morning. I'd have a table and a box of all my cards. I'd set up in the morning. He'd go thrifting and go do his thing while I sat there and just hustled the cards and stuff. So a lot of the early days was word of mouth. And, you know, classifieds was a big thing. You know, I wonder if someone even knows, like in the chat, like remembers classifieds, how like you'd look in the, you know, you get the paper and you look in the back and you're like, oh, is someone selling something or placing classified ads? So the difference between yesterday and today was the face-to-face contact. Now we do stuff like this live streaming where, you know, you connect through virtually. And so that was what the big difference was from yesterday and today.
Yeah, you were talking about classified ads. I remember a guy who used to have an infomercial. His name was like Don LaPrey or something like that. And he would come on every night at like 11:30 and try to sell you this system of like through using a system of tiny classified ads in strategic newspapers around the country, you can make $3,000 a month or whatever the amount was.
Oh, yeah,
He never said what the heck you were supposed to put in the ad. Obviously, that was why he wanted you to buy, the course. But it's just interesting. I was thinking about that classified ads. Man, that's a lost art,
Yeah, definitely.
We had a couple other questions here or in comments. Highway Bus said, Pokemon stuff may be strong in 10 years. What do you think about that, Chris? You've got a lot of experience in these fields. How do you see that Pokemon's been around a while, actually, but how do you see it playing out with the current craze, if you will?
Well, here's the anomaly about Pokemon. Pokemon has been popular throughout the years. Nostalgia stuff, you kind of want to hit it when it's at its low. And I think Pokemon stuff will pretty much hold its value, especially like, and I assume he's talking about the cards, and even some of the early cards now go for hundreds of dollars if they're graded. And I honestly see Pokemon cards not losing their value, and they might even gain their value over the years. Definitely.
I want to ask you this question because I've heard some other people talking about this. I've heard, and I don't buy it or keep it, but I've heard that Legos have appreciated at a better rate than gold over the last few decades. Is that true? Do you collect Legos? Do you have an experience selling them?
Yeah, I have some experience with Legos, not as a collector, but my son would buy them. And of course, I was a child of the 80s, so I had Legos, and used to get them all over the floor, and your parents would step on them in the middle of the night. And so I think like the thing about Legos is the stuff that came out maybe like 10 years ago when there wasn't a huge collector market, because to be honest, there's a huge collector market now, and that company literally makes billions of dollars a year on those little blocks. And they would come out with like a Millennium Falcon that came out, and I want to say it was like $200 when it came out, right? And this was like maybe 12, 15 years ago. I don't remember, but it was a while ago. And people were like, oh my goodness, like $200 for a Lego set. That's absurd. And that's the whole thing, is it's supply and demand. They didn't really make that many, and that many people didn't really buy them. And also Legos, you're going to lose all the pieces, and Legos, you're going to open them and play with them. So the ones that are sealed, are going to go for a lot of money, a lot of the older sets. And it comes back to supply and demand. And that's why, you can actually take that example and put it in any category. Like literally, that's why old baseball cards are worth so much, is because most people threw them away, put them in their bike spokes. Their mom found them and threw them away, and no one thought they were going to be worth anything. And that's the same thing with the video game stuff that's happening now, is the supply and demand. Everyone's like, oh, this was never going to be a thing. And the funny part is, I knew when I was a kid, like, oh, this is going to be the baseball cards of tomorrow, these games. And sure enough, that's what happened.
Wow. That's, I think about how many Legos I had when I was a kid. And I don't think I kept any of them. Unfortunately, they probably did not make it. But yeah, I mean, it definitely, that makes sense. I mean, so basic supply and demand, economics always rules in these situations, like the Millennium Falcon, for instance. Along those lines, Kelly had asked, what should we put in the attic for 20 years? What do you think is going to be nostalgic 20 years from now? And I would guess by that question, worth some money 20 years from now is there something you could sit on, maybe 20 years is the right time frame, but maybe it's not. But what's your thought on that?
That's another great question, and that's actually the $1 million question. Because if we honestly knew that question, we'd all be buying that particular thing, putting it away. For you can never tell what's going to be worth. The thing that I know that has not gone down a lot that you can pretty much bank on is old currency, especially like silver coins and gold coins, because that has appreciated over the years. And it's also, its intrinsic value has always kept there. As far as collectibles, you never know what's gonna, as far as that, I can't give you a clear answer, but definitely coins are something that you could put away. Most people don't have that kind of thing, but it's one of those things where it's a very hard question to answer, because honestly, if I knew it, if you knew it, if anyone knew it, we'd go and buy whatever that was and put it away. So it's kind of one of those things where you kind of got to have an intuition. If you do this long enough, you have this intuition about, okay, all these people bought this and they opened them and all that stuff. So that's a really hard question to answer. So I hope that helps out a little bit.
No, it does. And I know I was thinking about my niece. She's a good bit younger than me, but she was a huge Beanie Baby collector.
Oh, I would love to get into that, actually.
Yeah, well, we can. We definitely can. And she, she had them in the cases. She had the guides. I think she came and got them from my parents' house because my parents actually raised her. And, but, I guess the market for that particular item is not as good as it used to be, or at least at some point. I guess there are some valuable ones, but what about that? If people have Beanie Babies, that's a great one, because that one comes up a lot in reselling groups. What are your thoughts on Beanie Babies?
As a matter of fact, I was going to make a YouTube video about the kind of history of Beanie Babies and where I think the future is going to go for that. I don't know for 100%, but I'm pretty sure the nostalgia of Beanie Babies is going to come back around. I'm not going to say it's going to be to the height of the craze that it was in 1995 and 96, where it literally peaked. I know that the first generation tags, those ones are still worth a lot of money. Go ahead, go on eBay, go search Thai Beanie Baby and sort by highest price, and you'll see some of those early ones. They still demand $600, $700, $800. So I think the newer ones are never going to gain any more traction, which was like third generation tags. And anyone that collects Beanie Babies will know what I'm talking about. Third generation tags have the little yellow star on them. A lot of those aren't going to be worth anything. And you can see now you can buy literally piles of those. So usually I would say if you have Beanie Babies right now, it might not be the best time to sell them. Obviously, and I would say just hold on them to see what happens. But I know for sure, the first generation ones are still going to hold their value. Not like they were in the 90s, but they're still holding value today.
That's great. That's great. And you're exactly right. You and I were talking about that. I mean, or we've talked about that, a little bit earlier, that, things come back around. And it's very possible. Now, the tricky part is obviously you can't hang on to everything and go buy everything you get your hands on, because you're going to need a warehouse the size of Montana. But there's definitely some items you can take some risk on. And along those lines, Foggy Mountain had said, what about Disney? Because Disney's a very iconic company. I know with some clothing, when I see a Disney clothing item, if it's an adult item, I usually try to pick it up if it's in good shape, because it's going to sell. And it'll sell for, decent usually, nothing crazy unless it's something really unusual. But what about Disney collectibles? And that seems to encompass a pretty wide range of items, I would guess, being Disney.
Absolutely. And I was actually going to get into that. Disney products span the category goes so wide with Disney. And I found that you can actually find older vintage Disney stuff for relatively cheap. I've found old plushes at the stores for like $5 and sold them for $100. Another thing that a lot of people kind of pass up is even the older pressed pennies go for a lot of money. I mean, a lot of the thing is with Disney, it's the vintage stuff is starting to come around. And the thing is, like I said, there's so much Disney product that you would have to literally, you could spend years just going through that stuff. But as far as Disney stuff, original artwork, obviously, a lot of the original sells if you can get them. A lot of the artists that have passed on, a lot of their stuff goes up in value over the years. A lot of the prints, limited edition stuff, but a lot of the toys and stuff that comes out now, I don't see a lot of that stuff appreciating greatly over the years, for sure.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned sells, because Karin, I don't know if she's still in here listening or not, but she has a couple Disney cells that she has framed that we have here in the house somewhere, and I know they're in the hundreds of dollars. They're not inexpensive for sure, but I don't know if she'll part with them.
And definitely cells are, even regular cartoon cells from the 80s and stuff. You used to be able to buy like tons of them in the early 2000s, and a lot of those are starting to go up. And the thing with any category is everyone needs to pretty much do research, because when there's cartoon cells, there was ones that were mass produced And then there's the original ones too. And a lot of the original ones, and the thing is, cells, if anyone doesn't know, they're like clear plastic that have layers of animation on top of them, layers of art. And the most expensive, or the more valued ones, I would say, are the ones that actually have the backgrounds with them. Just like almost like a complete item.
Yeah, they're really cool looking. You know, because obviously the way that cartoons and so on were done, it used to be different than it is today. I originally used to do it really a weird way. Not weird, just it was the only, you know, they didn't have the technology. But all right, so let's see. Ginger had a question that said, where do you do most of your sourcing with the best return on investment?
That's a good question also. I would say the last couple of years have been like garage sales and thrift store finds. I definitely highly suggest anyone that wants to take reselling seriously to go find all your mom and pop thrift stores within a 25-mile, 50-mile radius of where you live. Go there once a week if you can afford it. If you can, get to know the people. I cannot tell you, as probably one of the best advice I can give for thrift store hunting, is get to know the employees, get to know management, you know, be just normal, be nice, you know, start up a conversation. You never know what it leads. And for me, I've made relationships over the years where they'll call me and be like, hey, Chris, I got a bunch of video games in. You want to come take a look at them? Today, a lady called me and was like, I have a bunch of baseball cards. Come take a look. And I ran over there because, you know, that's what I started with. And of course, I got there and it was all kind of 80s stuff that isn't worth much. But, you know, always get a relationship with the thrift store people. And I would say, so for me personally, thrift stores and garage sales are the best sourcing opportunities for me personally.
So even for when you're looking for collectibles, would you still say that's true, that thrift stores and garage sales are the best sources?
Yes, and I want to preface, or I want to also clarify, like Goodwills, you're not going to find a lot of high quality collectibles. You will find stuff eventually, or through just simple equation, you're going to get to that. But the mom and pop ones I found is when you're going to find the higher quality things. And the garage sales, usually people have all their stuff tucked away in a garage somewhere, and then they open up that box and it's just a treasure trove of things, and they literally just want to get rid of the stuff. So the ROI is so there when it comes to garage sales, because they're like, I want $10 for this whole box. So
yeah, that's really great that you definitely can work some deals at a, you know, that's just volume, saying, hey, if I take all this, we got a box last garage sale season last year, I remember, and I think I paid $5 for the box, and only like 3 things in it were worth something, but the 3 things were worth about $100. So, you know, I was just like, oh, how much for the box? You know, because he had individual items. He's like, I just want to get rid of $5. I'm like, great.
Yeah, don't ever be afraid to ask for a discount, to bundle, to haggle. I hate that word haggle. It sounds like an old witch on the hill or something, like, oh, I'm gonna haggle, you know. So don't ever be afraid to say, hey, will you take X amount for X amount of items? And the ironic part is, most of the time people will they just really want to get rid of the stuff.
Yeah, that's great. You're exactly right. Let's take a moment here, guys. I want to tell you, we've got 50 people watching right now. So if you're enjoying this show tonight, you're enjoying the content, you're enjoying hearing Chris's perspective and about his experiences, hit that like button down below. Lets me know, lets YouTube know that we're doing a good job. Also, check out the About section, guys. We have Chris's YouTube channel listed there. He had a different channel with a different focus, but he's just recently started a newer one that's more focused on thrifting and reselling. So check out the link there in the About, and as well as his Instagram and Twitter links are there too. So you can reach out to him. And I can say from seeing Chris in action in our Facebook group, he is way more than happy to help somebody with a question, and he goes above and beyond every single day. He is an asset to the community. So if you have questions, you want to connect to him and make, you know, pick his brain a little bit, please reach out to him and check out his channel too when you get a moment, and all the great content he's starting to put out over there. So let's see. There's some other questions we had here in comments I wanted to cover. Krillin, our good friend of the channel, says, hey, don't forget about the garbage pail kids, Chris. What do you think about garbage pail kids? I barely remember these. Like they were characters in trash cans and dumpsters and so on, right? Or something like that.
Exactly. They were kind of like during the height of the Cabbage Patch Kids that were going on in like 1984. That was like literally one of the first toy crazes that I can remember. And so they made kind of spoof Cabbage Patch Kid little kind of like comic book style cards. And actually that's where I started. When I was 6, I remember buying those off the ice cream man. And, you know, we would literally try to put the sets together. And honestly, we would try to actually hide them from our parents because back then it was considered like, oh, those cards are evil and stuff. So we had to keep them from our parents. And like, it was kind of like contraband, but it's kind of funny to think about how much times have changed since then. But yeah, Garbage Pail Kids, that's another actually thing to look into too, if you can find them. A lot of the original sets, if you can find them in mint condition, are worth a good amount. And that's another thing where you want to take a specific category and you know down the road if it's going to be worth anything. Because think about it, they were stickers. They weren't just cards, they were stickers. So most people took the stickers off, put them on something, and you know that a certain percentage of those are no longer going to exist.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, again, scarcity, and because of the way the product was made, it was a sticker. So a lot of them just got destroyed by that. You know, people just stuck them on something, so they were no longer as valuable or easy to find. Pomona Lomas, I hope that I'm saying that right. If I'm not, I do apologize. Says, asked, do you recommend to build your feedback first before considering to sell? And I would assume that question means feedback in terms of as a buyer on eBay, because if you're not selling yet, how can you get feedback? I'm not sure. Do you understand that question, Chris?
Yeah, I think I know what she's trying to say. And I think she's trying to say like a lot of buyers are afraid to purchase stuff from someone that has low feedback. And I can understand that mentality. And so I'm thinking like, you know, I think like you shouldn't really worry about that. If you're going to be a reseller, just dive in head first, sell some stuff, get some feedback. And there's kind of like a little hack that most people know about when you're starting is buy stuff. You know, you're going to normally buy supplies and everything. You get feedback from that. So you can easily pump your feedback, you know, in a day if you have to kind of, you know, get yourself a little bit of momentum. But smart buyers are going to look through that. They're going to see that, you know, you didn't sell really much. So I would say don't worry about the feedback. Everything will come eventually. Just patience and staying on that road and just walking forward.
Agreed. Absolutely agree. There was another question that came in here from Hayes Steiner, and I think it was a question for me. He said, hey, Prof, do you think that getting friends into reselling will create competition between us? When you say us, I'm assuming you're meaning between you and your friend, or I would guess that's what you're going at. And I guess my answer would be, yeah, probably. People like to compete. But as I like to say on this channel over and over, that really the only person you're competing with is yourself. Your results are your results. Chris's results are going to be different than mine. We sell in different categories. We're at different levels. We do different things. It's not about whether I'm a better seller than him or he's a better seller than me. It's really about, am I going to be a better seller tomorrow than I am today? And that's always what I strive for. The competition is all in here and in my heart. And it's really, I'm not comparing myself to other resellers out there. And even if I did, there would always be somebody I'm probably quote unquote doing a better job than and quote unquote doing a worse job than. So why even go down that road? You know, just compete with yourself and let other people worry about their perception of it. So that's my take on it. I don't want to distract too much from the show, but it was a specific question, so I did want to answer it.
I agree with you fully, totally.
Highway Bus asks, Chris, do you get a lot of stuff graded by PSA? Now, can you explain, first of all, what PSA is? Because I have no idea what that is. And then if so, do you get graded by them?
PSA started grading baseball cards, and I want to say in the mid 90s, could have been the early 90s. And it's basically like a plastic case that the collectible is housed in. And it so you send your card in, they take a look at it. There's a grading scale from, I think it's 1 to 10. I don't even know if there's a 0, but it's 1 to 10. They look at it, an expert looks at it, they grade it by like how sharp the corners are and stuff. So PSA is just a grading company. And it's funny that you bring grading stuff up. Like I was saying earlier, my history is so deep that I even tried to start a grading company when I was in my early 20s. I tried to start grading toys, like no one was doing it, and I'm like, oh, that would be a great little niche to get into. And I tried and I failed, of course. And the thing is, another company picked it up and actually is doing quite well with grading stuff. So PSA, I don't really send anything in because I don't really collect baseball cards too much. But if I found like a really nice Mickey Mantle card or one of the popular cards from the 50s or the 60s, I would probably send it in.
Okay, so obviously, guys, whenever you have, an older item like that could potentially be very valuable, you absolutely want to get it checked out by an expert. And I guess that gives you a mark of authenticity too, right, Chris? If a professional company, they don't have a stake in it in saying that it is or isn't valuable or it's this condition or that condition.
Yeah, actually, you bring up a great point, and the grading companies will actually authenticate your cards because anyone could take an old card that's kind of has a little bit of flaws and like cut it to make it mint condition, but a lot of the companies are going to know that card has been cut or forged or cleaned up in some way, and they'll grade it, but they'll be in the grading thing say like trimmed or modified or something like that, so you're not getting a true representation of the original product.
So people will trim off the edges or the corners that tend to get the most messed up, I guess.
Yeah, in the early days, that was a huge thing because, of course, cards, they want to be mint condition. So people would do silly things like cut make the corners straight or something like that. So yeah, that used to happen. Not so much today, because if you want to sell a card that's going to be like $50,000 and you send it in, someone's going to know. They're going to look at it and see right away.
Yeah, I guess when you get up in that stratosphere of the more valuable items, you're dealing with obviously probably a more sophisticated buyer, and they're going to do their due diligence as well. Exactly. As well they should if they're going to spend that kind of money. Obviously, they're going to want to make sure they're getting the real deal. Elio asked, what item or items would you say are your top sellers? Now, all right, and that's a good question, Elio, but I'm going to ask Chris to do something before he answers that. I'm going to ask you to define top sellers because that means something different to everyone. When people ask me about jeans, they'll say, what's your top selling jean? And I'm like, well, you could argue Levi's. Does it go for the most money? No, but I sell the most of them. So, define what you would say means top seller to you, and then maybe try to see if you can, answer, what are some of your top sellers?
Right. I sell a lot of video games. I think that video games for me move a lot faster than anything else. And it honestly, it just comes down to is the demand there? Because you can literally sell thumbnails or little spoons all day long, if the price is right and there's the demand. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. So Krillin says that Prof, that's why quarters have ridges. People used to shave the edges. You ever run into a quarter that the edges have been shaved? I didn't know that.
No, but a thing that you find when you collect silver coins is a lot of the older Roman ones, people couldn't really break a, could you break a 20? So they used to actually cut pieces out. That's why I think the pieces of 8, if you ever heard something like that, I think that has something to do with it. And no, but I found you can find coins that have holes in them, where like the kids in the 50s used to like put a rope or a string on them and put them in the vending machines.
I've seen those. I think I saw those in my grandparents' house.
Right.
Like it would be like a nickel or something, and it would have a hole just punched right through it. And I'm going, what is this for? But now it makes sense. They put them in a vending machine, buy them, and then pull them back out.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing you're doing.
That's a lot of work for a nickel.
Yeah, but back in the day when you can get like literally a 4-course or 5-course meal for a nickel.
True. That's a good point. I guess I hadn't thought of it that way, but maybe it was worth a little bit more. Let's see. All right, so questions, guys. Keep sending the questions in. Chris has been just knocking them out left and right. And, you know, try to type question mark in front of your question if you can, or the word question in caps, just so we know that it is a question. Makes it easier for me to see in the chat. But thank you guys for coming out tonight. All right, so I'm just going to say this one to you instead of putting it over in our little chat box here. Brandon asked, how long do you hold on to an item till you call it quits and take it down? Or do you call it quits, Chris, and take it down on an item? What's your thought on that?
For me personally, I'll list something with, I think it's the, what is it, the canceled, good till canceled, or what is that option for buy it now?
Yeah, good till canceled, just keeps running forever till you stop it.
That's what I do personally. I'll put something up, I'll leave it, and then I'll drop the price gradually. I'm really bad at that, actually, at just leaving stuff on my, I've had stuff that's on my eBay store for 3 years.
The truth comes out.
Yeah, no, I'm really bad at monitoring my stuff.
You know, I'm going to answer that question too a little bit because, you know, I will say on my channel frequently that jeans usually sell on average in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, somewhere in there. And that's true. They do. And a lot of clothing sells fairly quickly. But I still have, when I started this most recent numbering system, jean number 1. And it's been on there for well over a year now. So one day somebody will buy that pair of jeans. But what is it really hurting, guys, if you have the storage, you have the space for it? Unless it's something maybe you've tied up a lot of capital, you can flip through your capital. You could start liquidating it. But I hate to sell things for a loss. It just drives me crazy because I'm like, I know there's a buyer for this. Like the market hasn't changed. It just hasn't. They just haven't seen it at the right time. So I tend to hold on to it. You know, eBay doesn't punish you for that. Once you get higher up in the ranks of eBay as a seller, your listing cap will go up and up and up. And eventually that will no longer be a crutch or that will no longer be a hindrance. When you can list thousands and thousands of items, you know, most people aren't going to be able to list that many and they're not going to run out. So it doesn't become an issue. Toodles O'Dale, that's a great name, by the way, Toodles. Toodles O'Dale says, I recently had eBay pull one of my listings on Ghettopoly. Ghettopoly, I guess the word ghetto and monopoly, the back part of it, saying it was restricted. Would you be able to comment on this as how is a seller supposed to know what items are restricted? That's a good question, Chris. If you had any run-ins with restrictions on your items on eBay?
Not really. I've had accounts for many years, and I'll get is it the Vero?
Yeah, Vero.
Vero. I get that like every once in a while, maybe like every couple years, and it's like usually something that I sourced. And for that, there's honestly, so the question is, how do you check it? I would say kind of do your research a little bit. If you don't see that, you don't find it anywhere on eBay, there might be some kind of issue there. But honestly, some of the best collectibles I've found weren't listed on eBay because they were super rare. So I guess just kind of do your research a little bit and then just list it, see what happens. You know, I know that's not the greatest advice to give to anybody, but just list it, see what happens.
Better to beg forgiveness than ask permission, right?
There you go. But yeah, do your research if you can.
Yeah, and I would say too, I've had one Vero item get pulled. It was a pair of jeans. And I guess the manufacturer said that it was fake. I have absolutely no reason to think it was fake. I think it was actually maybe another seller that reported it as fake.
Oh yeah, that happens too. Yeah.
Right. You know, somebody sees competition. It was kind of an obscure company, and I just don't sell that jean anymore. Didn't really hurt my sales anymore, but I'm not going to take the risk. And I've heard other people have issues with that jean too.
Yeah.
And I did have one item that this was the funny one. I found a pair of Jinko jeans, which used to be really popular, skater jeans back in the 90s. They had really big, wide bottoms.
Oh, yeah.
And then they went away, and they've come back recently. And I found a pair at a thrift store. They were a women's pair, and they weren't really the big, wide bottoms, but they were Jinko. And they were kind of cool because they didn't have belt loops. You know, they were more like a trouser, really. And I had them up, and I sold them. And I'm like, cool. And when I went to look at the address was Jinko in Los Angeles or somewhere in California. And I went, and I thought, really? And so I looked it up, and that was the company headquarters. Like, I Googled the company's headquarters. It was it. I'm like, are they buying this because they think it's a fake? And I talked to people, and they said, you know, just send it. Because I was going to cancel the sale. I was getting all freaked out, you know, and they said, just send it. And I never heard anything. So they might have, and sometimes companies will buy up their older items.
Right.
If they've seen them. So that can happen.
Yeah, my personal opinion on that, I think also companies will buy older styles because they're going to reintroduce them, and they want to see. I know I've kind of done stuff like that in the past where I bought some of my old art just to try to figure out what I did previous, and maybe they have a collection, a museum that's not open to the public, or some kind of archiving thing that they have, or they want to see how this particular thing was stitched and stuff like that. So that's my honest opinion on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's what was happening with mine too. So list your item, take the risk, you know, and you can always call eBay, I suppose, and ask them. You may get a right answer, but you may not. So anyway, all right, let's move along here. So the next question is from Highway Bus Chris. Do you collect as well, or do you just move everything along and sell it?
I used to collect stuff, but I know this is going to sound like blasphemy and everything for a collector, but it's like, for me, it's just a lot of collection things take up space, and you can't really take it with you when you pass on and stuff like that. So I kind of have that mentality. I do like certain books. I guess I collect certain books, art books and stuff like that. I do have certain toys, certain video games that I remember when I was a kid and stuff like that I like to play, but I'm not a huge collector by any means. No. Yeah,
me either. I'm a minimalist. I tend to get rid of crap, just in general. And Karin, she hangs on to some things a little bit longer, so we find a happy medium between there. So, or at least we try to. I'm like, hey, we could sell that. All right. So Stephen Irvin says, with collectibles, do you ever auction them off when the market seems bad, or do you hold on to them until they quote unquote come around again? So with collectibles.
Yeah, that's actually a hard question to answer too, because it comes back to, you know, knowing down the road what's going to be valuable or what's not. I would say, you know, if you have it and it's going for something, you might as well get rid of it and sell it, because the percentage is against you that down the road it's going to go up in value. I mean, a lot of people speculate in baseball cards every year on that one pitcher who's gonna be a Hall of Famer and is a rookie, and everyone's like, this pitcher, buy all of his cards, and they go for a crazy amount of money, and then the next year what happens? You get hurt, you forget about him. And the thing is, I think a lot of companies use that as a good marketing tool, like, oh, we're gonna promote this guy, and chances are those Tom Brady's of the world, they're gonna be few and far between. So if you have something and you know you can get some money for it, you might as well let go of it. I know that the things that are worth the most are usually the sealed things that are in mint condition. So that's pretty much my answer to that one.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you're exactly right. You made a great point there about especially when you're dealing with a player, you have no idea what's going to happen. You really, there's so many variables there of which you have no idea, you know, that what's going on in their personal life, or an injury, or, you know, they get in trouble with the law, or they get a new coach comes in and they don't play the same way. I mean, just so many factors can change there. So I think that's really tricky.
And absolutely. I think the term is called strike when the iron is hot.
Yeah.
And the thing is, probably the most recent example of that is Hatchimals. You know, we were lucky to find one for our daughter in Christmas, and that was like, oh, the hottest thing. And now they can't literally give those away. So always try to strike when the iron is hot.
Yeah, that goes back to, you know, just and you know, it's like trying to time the stock market though. Sometimes it can be tricky. You think, oh well, it hasn't reached the peak yet, you know, and then you wait a little longer and it drops 20%. You're like, how did that just happen? But so all right, let's take a moment here to talk about Chris's channel, guys. His YouTube channel is, the link to it is listed in the description of this video, as well as his Instagram and Twitter accounts. Chris is super helpful with our Facebook group on helping out with questions and people. So if you have those, check out his Instagram and Twitter, and also check out his channel. He's been putting out some content there on his thrift store trips, and obviously he has you know, decades of knowledge here about collectibles, eBay, pre-eBay experience, you know. So anytime you can talk to somebody like that who's got that kind of knowledge and that background and that wisdom, I mean, you're just gonna level up automatically after that conversation. So check all those out, and those will be posted. They're already in the description of this video, but check them out, you know, after the video as well. And please hit the like button, guys. And we got 77 people watching, so thank you for that. 77 people watching on a Thursday night. Some great resellers out here. You guys are bringing great questions. Keep them coming. We got about another 15 or 20 minutes to go here, and Chris has been just knocking these questions out. So we have one here from Brandon, who asked about increased sales when, I guess, income tax refunds coming back. You've been on eBay forever, and you've probably thought about that at some point. So when those income tax checks start coming in, which I guess they'll start coming in for a lot of people, maybe in March, if people got their W-2s in January, and, you know, even some in February and on into April. Do you see a peak in that, a spike in your sales that you think you could attribute to that, or do you think it really matters one way or the other?
I would say really not really, and if there is, it's very minimal. I know that, you know, some brands might feel a higher bump, you know, like the service industry or stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's a different kind of where that money's going. So I think it goes up a little bit, but not a lot for me personally.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing for me too. I would say I don't know that people get income tax returns and their first thought is I'm going to jump on eBay or Amazon. I mean, maybe. I mean, I'm not trying to be flip there, but it could be. You know, people tend to put that money, if they're getting a return, towards a vacation sometimes, maybe paying off debt from Christmas. It's still lingering around on a credit card. I don't know if they're really, I don't know. Somewhere that info is out there on the internet. What do people spend their tax return on?
That's a good question. Yeah, for sure.
I'm not sure. I'm just thinking about kind of logically, but honestly, I don't know. So I should probably just quit talking about that subject that I really don't know anything about. All right. So Krillin asks if you have knowledge about comic books, because Krillin has a ton of Valiant comics. I think I remember this. I went through a comic book phase, and that phase has ended. I'm waiting for the movies to come out. He says they will be better than the Marvel movies. So what about comic books, and specifically Valiant, if you have any knowledge on that particular manufacturer or distributor?
So actually that brings a smile to my face, because when I was a kid, I was knee deep into comic books, and I know Valiant Comics very, very, very well. I'm here in Southern California, where I want to say they had their headquarters, and I remember Valiant Comics very well. And I want to say they were the first company that started to do like limited editions and dealer exclusives. So a dealer would buy like, you know, 100 comics of an issue, and they would get a special edition number 0 and stuff like that. And he actually brings up a very, very, very good point about nostalgia, and not really nostalgia. I'm trying to think what it is. Oh, trends. I would say it probably would fall under the category of trends. The Walking Dead, huge, huge, huge show right now. If you knew that Walking Dead was going to be a TV series down the road and you were lucky enough to buy the #1 issue, you would have made a ton of money. So that's another thing. So what you're saying is, you know, Valiant's going to be doing movies down the road. I'm not going to say it's going to bump it up some, because people are going to see it. They're going to look and research it. I lived through the Valiant comic days. And so it's not going to have the nostalgia factor that Marvel does, because Marvel transcends generations, where Valiant transcends a generation. Do you know what I mean? So I think definitely the comics will probably, how about that for oxymoron? They'll go up. I think the very rare ones that were dealer exclusives, and whoever was in the comic book knows exactly what I'm talking about. I made a lot of money as a kid with comics. Does anyone here in the chat remember the death of Superman?
I remember that.
My dad, I don't know what he was thinking, but he heard about it. We used to get a catalog in every month, and he's like, "Oh, Superman, the death of Superman. I'll buy like 3 cases of that." And we didn't even know. And me and my brothers, because another thing is we used to trade with comic book shops. It would kind of like, we didn't have really much money, so we'd go and trade. We'll give you this comic for X amount of baseball cards or something. We literally traded those Superman 75 black bagged comics for years, because we bought them for like, I think they were like 76 cents for the bag comics.
Right.
And they were going for like $50 at the time. We had cases of them.
Wow. What a great gamble. And I remember I had one.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what happened to it. You know, and anytime I guess you're speculating with a comic book, you know, there's a lot of factors there that aren't in your control. Like you said, with The Walking Dead being made into a show, a wildly successful show. I mean, who even would have guessed that? I mean, there's been tons of zombie movies and undead movies and so before, and none of them have succeeded like The Walking Dead.
Exactly. And I think Preacher came out too, and that was a DC Vertigo comic, and the show really didn't do that well. But when people were talking about, oh, this is going to be made, a lot of the comic books went up in value. So that's another tip. Always be aware of what's going on, because popular movies and stuff like that will help elevate prices for collectibles.
Yeah, like we saw that a couple years ago with all the Frozen stuff on Amazon.
Yeah.
Was going nuts.
Well, what happened with that is Disney didn't know that the movie was going to be so popular, so they didn't make a ton of merchandise. So when the movie came out and it was like really successful, they were scrambling to try to get stuff put out. Wow.
I'm going to give you a comment here that Krillin had. That's who asked you about the Valiant comic, and then I'm going to go to the next question. He says, tell Chris I just picked up a copy of Amazing 300 in a estate sale for $1 last month.
I don't know what that title is, if it's a Valiant. I remember like Man of War, Bloodshot, Infinity Guy, and all those other ones, but I don't know what that one is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was wondering if he meant Amazing
Spider-Man. I got stumped. I don't know something about a collector.
Hey, nobody knows it all, you know, despite what some will tell you, right? Some people would probably even accuse me of that. So Insane Kitten asks, have you ever fixed a collectible in order to resell it for a higher price? And an example, if you have, not customized, but actually fix it, I guess, if something was broken on it.
I'm trying to think really quick if I've done something like that. I think I might have refurbished something, but if you're going to do that, you should always disclose that in your description.
Right. And you bring up a great point there, Chris. I mean, you never, guys, if you're out there listening and you don't have a lot of experience selling eBay, Amazon, anywhere, and you know, and you want to get started or you're thinking about it, don't lie to people. You know, if you fix something and you didn't disclose that, you're lying. A lie of omission is still a lie. So that's a great way to A, make your customer mad, and B, possibly get suspended or banned from the site. So it's just no reason to do that. Tell people, it's not worth the risk, and it's not really a morally correct thing to do either. But just tell people, hey, this got fixed on it, and then they can make a decision, if they want to get it or not. So it's not necessarily a deal breaker for some people.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Okay, so Brandon says, do you have any go-to items to list, and what items would you not list at all? Wow, that'd be a big list of what I would not list.
When I started out, and this was in the early 90s on auctions, and there was Yahoo auctions before eBay, and then there was actually something before Yahoo auctions. I started out selling cards and things that were small, because to me, I didn't have a lot of space in my apartment, and it was just easier to ship small things. And even even today, that's a thing. I would say probably like good advice for people that are start selling small things. And the question was, what would you not sell? I wouldn't sell like washing machines or something like that, refrigerators, it's just too bulky and I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, and that has to probably kind of be local pickup only.
Exactly.
Not shipping that. Confirmation, the comic book was The Amazing Spider-Man number 300, so I guess the first appearance of Venom.
Oh, okay, yeah. The thing is, what for me, that I sold my comic book collection at the worst time. This was before the Marvel movies came out. I think it was 2001. I sold a huge comic book collection that I collected for over, 10 years or 15 years or something like that. And I regret it to this day, because I had a lot of, the Deadpool movie that just came out. I had a lot of the first appearances of Deadpool and a lot of that stuff that's worth like a lot of money now. So
very cool. That was a completely funny movie, and I'm very ashamed of myself for laughing in certain places, but it was pretty funny.
The thing is, I work in the movie industry. I'm an encoder. I actually make files for Netflix and iTunes and stuff like that.
Cool.
So I got to work on that movie before it was out, and I was just like, this is like, I love this, because a lot of the Disney Marvel stuff is very kind of good versus evil and very wholesome, and this movie was just like taking it to like another level. And the funny part is seeing in the very beginning when Deadpool's like rolling around in the car and seeing that like Pokemon card just like floating past the camera and the little Hello Kitty thing, like, oh man, little things like that were so cool.
Who knew Ryan Reynolds could be that funny? I didn't know he could be, but he was really good in it.
Yeah.
All right, so Jessica had a question, and people are answering the question, and the gist of it, and this is what's interesting to me, because Jessica basically asked, she was thinking about getting started on eBay, and she thinks the market is flooded. There's a lot of items ending without bids. And her question was, is it too late to get started? Is it too late in the game to get started on eBay? So how would you respond to that, Chris?
Absolutely not. It is not too late to get into any kind of market, even a market that's oversaturated, like baseball cards, pants, shirts, things like that. A lot of that stuff is always in demand. People are looking for that kind of stuff. And don't be afraid. Just do your research. Know what you're selling. Know what price you should be selling something at. And honestly, like, anyone could do this. And that's the great part about technology now compared to back then. I used to have to use a scanner to scan my baseball cards. There wasn't digital cameras back then. Everything was all film, and it was just, oh my goodness, it was such a nightmare to try to list something in the pre-eBay days. Yeah,
that's great. And I couldn't agree with you more, Chris. And just in general, Jessica, when there's a lot of items out there in a category, that means there's a big market usually. And you have to kind of take that into consideration. And your goal is not to get in and dominate a market on eBay or Amazon. There's way too many listings for you to do that as a new seller in most cases. You're not going to go in there and say, oh, I'm going to be the biggest jeans seller on eBay. Good luck with that. That would be quite a feat to do. But what you can do is you can go in and you can be a really good seller in a niche that you choose. You can learn it. You can make great buys for, you can source things for, very reasonable prices. You can take great photos. You can make great listings. You can make great titles with great keywords. You can do all those things to provide great customer service, world class. And if you do all those things, you're going to be successful even in what seems like a crowded niche or a crowded market, because you're going to stand out. You're going to stand out. Like your listings are going to stand out. Your photos are going to stand out. You're going to be doing things in a profitable manner that when they do sell, you know, you're going to make money on them, and you're still going to make mistakes, of course, but absolutely not. It's not too late. So don't sweat it. Get started. We had another question here, and we're coming to the top of the hour, so this might be the last one. And this is a classic one, Chris. We get it all the time, so we're going to get your take on it. You and I haven't talked about this. It's the age-old auctions or buy it now, and why?
Okay, here's my personal suggestion, or my personal preference, I should say, for doing this for years, is I sell all my stuff, 99.9% of the stuff, buy it now with best offer. I go higher usually than it should, because sometimes you never know. I've gotten high prices on things that I thought I could have got way less for. So I always go high, buy it now, best offer. And you can, the thing is, what's good about that is you can gradually move it down till you find that sweet spot. And for auctions, I suggest that, you know, there's a lot of sellers that do auctions, and that's good because it actually brings traffic to your page. And for me personally, I would only do auctions on like something that is like super high end, that I know is gonna gain a lot of traction over those 7 or 10 days.
Yeah, man, you're all over it, and this is something that I've been learning to do better too, is to price a little bit higher, guys, because let me tell you something. You don't know where that buyer is coming from, whether it's a collectible, like something maybe Chris is selling, or a clothing item like I'm selling, or anything. That buyer could literally see your item on that in the search, when they search for it, click on yours and buy it and never look at another one. And so you don't really know. And I always say, you know, it's that age-old maxim. What is something worth? It's worth what someone will pay for it. You know, and I'm not suggesting you go in and put crazy prices way super high above everyone else in the market, but pricing near the top of the market, it allows you to generate more profit when your items do sell. And it also, like Chris said, it lets you test the market to kind of find out where that sweet spot is. And, you know, you might be surprised sometimes. I'm surprised the jeans will go for a higher price. You know, there'll be like 80% of them in this range, but then there's 10% up here, and I can hit that range sometimes and hit it. And I'm like, man, that was like an extra, you know, 50% in my pocket just because I priced it higher and took a risk, and it sold. So don't be afraid of that. Anyway, great stuff. All right. Listen, guys, I'm going to have to probably call it a night on that one because it's 10:03 and I want to be respectful of my guest time. So
yeah, we can seriously do this for another 3 hours, I'm sure.
I know he's West Coast time, so he's like getting ready to go eat something. And here it's like 10 o'clock. We're all like, oh, on the East Coast.
I'm actually going to rush off to work. I have a kind of like a graveyard schedule. And that's another thing, is balancing listing and work life and family life too. That's a whole other element in itself.
We're going to have you back for another show and talk about that and some other things. So that came up while we were discussing. So, but thank you so much, Chris, for joining tonight. I want to really, I mean, man, you just killed it. You had so much info and content about things that honestly, I don't know much about, but you were able to provide great insight. So I just want to thank you. I want to thank everybody who was watching tonight, on the comments that came in. Great questions tonight. Be sure you check out Chris's channel. It's in the About section of this video, as well as his Instagram and Twitter. He is super, super helpful and super nice to ask a question to. So don't be afraid to do that too. If you come up with something, you know, later after the show airs and you're like, man, I wish somebody had asked this. Ask. There you go. So, but thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. It definitely was fun, and I definitely want to do this again. And I want to leave kind of one thing is, I haven't really done much clothing stuff over the years because I've kind of been afraid of it. And I started getting into clothes the last like couple months, and I have so much respect for you guys because there is so much to learn about clothing, about brand sizes, this and that. Oh yeah, I was driving myself crazy. So much respect to you guys.
Thanks. I appreciate it, man. So, All right. Well, listen, guys, that's going to do it for tonight here on another episode of Connect. Hit the like button before you walk out the door, and hit the subscribe afterwards too if you want to catch every video when they come out here on Prof Sales channel. And we will see you guys real soon. Thanks, everyone.